Welcome back to the Magic Mirror podcast. This is another special episode because once again we have our friend Alex, aka Salubrious Snail here.
Hello, hello.
And, as always, 33 Elk.
Hello.
I didn't introduce myself, but hopefully you know who I am at this point. I'm Khan the Trinket Mage. And if this is your first video you're watching of any of our stuff, that's very cool. Leave a comment. Today we want to talk about how to be the Archenemy, the big bad at your casual EDH pod. We're going to go over that, our thoughts, opinions, whatever else we want to say. I also want to talk a little bit about the last week's episode, talk about a few things people commented commonly about brackets, maybe a little bit of follow-up, and then we'll finish off with some questions from users. Any other topic you guys wanted to get to?
That about covers it for me.
Yeah, I don't think so. I could talk about my draft deck.
I was gonna ask you guys about your draft actually. So before we get into how your draft was, we needed to thank this podcast sponsor. It might not be a video you're watching. Card Castle. They're an easy way to digitally sort your cards. You can scan them, and then it keeps a digital collection of every card you've scanned. It's fast, it's convenient, and it's pretty fun to just scan cards in your free time. Click on the link in the description below to check it out. Thanks to Card Castle for sponsoring the video. Podcast, whatever. I don't know. Anyway.
It's hard to turn off the tuber brain.
I know. And especially because, I'm also, I have something planned with them for another video later that I think will be fun. So they are sponsoring a video.
They are actually such a cool sponsor to have. Anyway.
Real quick, you guys both just drafted, right? How was that?
Alex, if you want to start.
Yeah, it was fun. It was chaos draft. I have a friend whose dad worked for Wizards of the Coast for a while, so he has just some old packs lying around. And so I had I had contamination and a bunch of silly black creatures from the 90s, as well as a bunch of blue stuff. It's just like a funky aggro deck with a lot of overstated creatures that deal a lot of damage to me.
Yeah. Demir unalive aggro.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
And are you going to be putting that contamination in a commander deck?
No, I didn't keep it.
Phantom.
I don't know. Contamination is spicy. That might be a little bit too spicy for me.
Oh, I see.
It's a really strong card.
It's a heavy duty stacks piece. So
yeah, a friend of mine had a Daxos stacks list, and he would basically use contamination plus any mana rock that produces white to make a token with his commander every turn, and you could just keep the contamination going.
Yeah.
It was pretty crazy.
That's nasty. Yeah, and it's I feel like it's just so easy to keep it online in EDH. Like in limited, it definitely feels like it has
with
natural
a
downside,
Theomancer's flying around.
Oh,
Jadar.
yeah.
It's free.
Yeah, Bitter Blossom. Yeah, no, it's so easy to.
Yeah, it's a bracket 4 card, if you will.
Yeah, definitely.
As for me, I've been playing a lot of the MTGO Horror Cube. This is a cube that's running up until October 25th. I'm just streaming it on my Twitch channel. There's VODs up on my YouTube channel. If you go under the live tab, the ones with thumbnails, those games so far, the first two at least, I can definitely promise you are worth a watch if you love Cube. The second one, if you love Ishkana, oh man, I cast her like every game. And it's like, it was such a broken blue-green deck that I had her in. Very fun time. Horror Cube has been. I didn't draft any tonight. I was just too tired. But, there's definitely more to come. There's already 2 great uploads. Check them out.
And just so everybody knows, links to both of their YouTube channels will be in the description of this, so you can, click over there and check it out. Go subscribe to both of them.
Horror Cube is a pretty fun idea. Is it just like all of the creepy crawlies and various things, or is it a little bit more like closely themed with
there are themes, but they're mostly trying to stay in the horror realm. So for example, there's a lot of cards from Innistrad, a lot of cards from Duskmourn now. That's the newest update, is a lot of Duskmourn cards. To enable the Duskmourn blue-red theme of spells, there is a lot of like the expensive spells from Strixhaven, which is really funny when you open up like a Strixhaven card in a horror themed pack.
Yeah.
I had a really cool Jeskai control deck with Cursed Recording. It's the artifact for 4 mana that lets you tap it, and you can copy your next instant or sorcery spell you cast that turn. And I had the one Prismari spell. It was 7 mana that makes 2 4/4 elementals, so I'd make 16 worth of power for 7 mana, and then I was also just doubling up all my removal spells. It was such a brutal deck. That card is backbreaking, Cursed Recording and limited.
That goes pretty hard. Yeah.
Yeah, I also had a Geist Wave, so I could bounce it back to my hand and draw a card, and also clone it and bounce one of their creatures, and then replay the Cursed Recording.
That's sweet.
Oh man, it was so much fun. I also had an Abrade as a backup, kill my Cursed Recording option.
I love putting together goofy little engines in limited.
Oh man, it was so much fun, that deck. Anyway, we have a different topic to talk about tonight, and that's being the archenemy in Commander.
Yes. So we should I want to clarify that we're not talking about Archenemy, the Commander variant format, where you play with like a separate deck of cards and one player gets to draw those and they get extra effects. Archenemy is like cool and fun and all that, and the Dustborn Precons have Archenemy cards in them. So if you buy one of those, you can play this alternate format. We're talking about just in general, you're playing a pod and you happen to be the threat at the table. That's what we're talking about, not like the Commander variant. Yeah.
I really want to open up this conversation by first saying I play a lot of very different decks. Like I have a couple very aggressive decks. I have one controlling sort of deck, and then maybe one I would describe as mid-range. And what I've noticed is that during the point of a game, like over the course of a game, different archetypes of decks will take the crown of Archenemy at different times. So, for example, like an aggressive tokens deck almost always is like first priority to get Archenemy. And then you'll get it to the mid-range, and then the control decks start to get it. I don't know if you guys have noticed this phenomenon, so to speak, that like there's like sort of hierarchy of decks in terms of like how fast they get the Archenemy status at a table.
There will be moments where like there's like this terrifying like fast synergy engine deck starts to get going, and I'm just sitting there eyeing the like terrifying inevitability control deck going, oh, you're going to be
exactly
the problem later, but I can't deal with you now.
That's the main problem is like a lot of the time is like, oh my gosh, the Adeline player just made like 17 tokens on turn like 4 or 5, right? And you're just thinking this Rhystic Study in play means this guy probably has Cyclonic Rift, Farewell, and when he untaps for turn 7, this game's just over and we need to actually kill this guy first despite this guy's board state. And it's like,
this is a classic like mistake that players make, is when you're playing an aggro deck and you just focus the other person who is mid-range because they also have a board, and you're like, oh, they have blockers, they have things going on, I'll attack them because it's fair since they're already doing something. Whereas then the slower control deck just gets to like build up, when really you and that mid-range player, as you as the aggro player, them as the mid-range player, should just both be wailing on the control player.
Exactly. You cannot let them get that 6th mana for their Farewell, their 7th mana for their Cyclonic Rift, right? You need to be killing this player first.
Back when I played with the pool of $25 decks with some friends, whenever there were 2 like fast decks at the table, we would always say Aggro Alliance, and it was like half a joke, but also half not a joke, because that is what you do. You wail on the combo deck or the slow grindy deck. you don't wail on each other to start with.
My friends, we would literally say non-blue players got to stick together, and when we were playing not a blue control deck, it was just like we got to beat them up.
Those are the situations, man, where Hunted Horror really pops off. The 2 mana 7/7 black creature that gives another creature, another player 2/3s.
I gotta fit that in a deck.
Oh man, it's hilarious.
I haven't tried playing with those in Commander.
I need to so I've like toyed around with a 5-color politics deck where you just play all of those hunted effects and you just blink them as much as you can and play force combat. But I'm wondering if I can trim that down to just like Mardu aggro and use them as like aggro pieces and just be like, hey, we're not beating the Simic player. Let's shake on it and get in there. And I'm wondering, because I kind of want to build like Mardu aggro politics. I'm thinking about cutting the goad from my current goad deck and just building it more politics.
Based.
Yeah,
I hate
I mean,
Goad.
you have to trade out. You have to lose a little bit of control over the game if you're taking out the goat. But I think that could easily improve the deck. Although that also does then make it more reliant on your abilities as your
politician.
your charisma stat in Commander games.
Oh, we're all YouTubers. We got some some level of charisma.
Oh no, I just have an ego.
I just
You can disguise that as
sure.
charisma.
Yeah. I just really like Goad plus Jessica. It's kind of a funny thing, but I guess Jessica plus aggro works too. I don't
Anyway,
know. It's just less funny.
Basically, bottom line here is that's a major point I just wanted to bring up before we even get into like talking about being the archenemy and managing it. Is the archenemy really isn't who's ahead on board. You need to think about all of the politics going on behind the scenes as well. Like the control player, the combo player, they might not look strong on board. And yeah, you definitely need to answer the Adeline with their board-wide thing before they resolve some sort of monster that kills the game, right? But that all being said, you can't expend all your resources on that player and just like completely neglect your combo opponent and your control opponent, because they are very much going to become the archenemy very soon after you deal with the aggro player, almost immediately, in fact.
All right, so let's say we're all responsible gamers here and we're politicsing correctly, and we're like, hey, aggro player, you should probably hit the Simic control deck, and we're able to convince them and all that. When you look at multiple decks at the table, what is the archenemy commander that you are most concerned about?
It's such a cliche, but honestly, the first that has to go, in my opinion, is a Voltron player. And the reason being is they're just so quick. Voltron is very fragile. They'll almost always kill one player and then lose. But if you are the player that you're targeting and trying to kill first, you have no choice. They are your archenemy. And it's like an archenemy is not something that's the same for every player, I think. There's different lenses that you're looking through. And if you are getting Voltron down, that is your top priority, is putting that Voltron back in the command zone or somehow preventing it from swinging at you. That being said, immediately after that is probably the control player. I would definitely not allow anyone to try and wrath the board.
Although I do agree with your answer and I like it, I meant more specifically like, are you like, oh, Urza Lord High Artificer?
I see,
that's someone I need to focus on. I meant like a specific commander.
Oh yeah, no, any sort of commander, like this can translate directly. Like if you have a Voltron commander, Zergo Helm Smasher, like no matter how weak,
sure.
Yeah, that's if you're swinging at me, you're gone. And then also talking more control, like Council of Five, these sorts of cards that are really grindy value late game pieces. These are going to be the ones that are screaming, kill me first. Alex, what about you? Yeah.
I think I'm usually worried about the control player, just the person who's going to try and accumulate endless resources and just try and smush the table eventually. Like I don't know, a combo deck I can figure out how to deal with that. An aggro deck can be concerned, and definitely a Voltron deck can be scary, but I always have my eye on the control player, even though I am the control player some games.
Yeah, I mean, Archenemy doesn't really follow around a commander. Like, you could be playing Urza Lord High Artificer equipment, right? But yeah, there's definitely some stigma when it comes to selecting who to target. Did you have something in mind, Khan, when you bring that up?
Probably the greeniest green deck that could green.
Okay, of course, the artifact lover says the green decks has to go.
No, my problem with it is it's the most invisible value to most casual players.
Oh yeah.
It's the hardest for me to politics towards, because like if somebody's playing blue and I'm like, hey, you don't want them to counter your stuff, we should beat them up. That's like most people are like, yeah, I don't want him to counter my stuff. I'm gonna get that guy. But the problem is like when someone's playing like mono green and I'm like, when they get to like 12 mana, like we're screwed. It's a lot harder to be like, hey, they cast like cultivate into some 5-mana ramp spell or something. Like,
oh, but he has nothing in play. We need to focus
everything on them. Oh, but he has just lands in play, right? Yeah, exactly. That's who I'm like most scared of and the most I'm trying to like point towards.
Yeah, that's fair. Like, yeah.
Yeah. Though.
Go ahead, Alex.
the whole point of my Rada deck is just taking advantage of the fact that people underestimate the person who just has a billion lands and nothing
That's
else.
the whole point of my Mina and Den list. Like, there's no, like, it's not like fast combo. It doesn't like do anything. It just ramps to the point where I have so much mana. I have like infinite resources. There's like, oh, you countered my Kozilek. Here's a second Kozilek in the same turn. Like, I just have all of the cards, all of the everything I need. You know, it doesn't do anything individually strong. It just has enough mana to do all of the things.
Yeah, I don't have a ramp deck per se, but I definitely understand the vibe.
I found that sort of deck is actually really great for seeking out the archenemy status. And I don't know if that's something that you guys do a lot, but I made a video almost a year ago now called Fight the Table Ideology, or that was about what I call Fight the Table Ideology. And I still subscribe to this. I love to try and make a deck that will force my opponents to be spooked of me for a while. And I found the big rampy decks are really good for that and kind of creating this fun archenemy gameplay where I'm the enemy.
Oh, I think every single one of my decks is more often than not going to be the archenemy of a table. And I definitely build them for these like huge power game like moments where I do something stupid broken that doesn't win the game outright. I'll have to untap with it. And I let the table interact with me. And see if they can try to, claw a victory from me. That's how I just build most of my decks anyway. Con, do you have anything like that?
Oh, I mean, I don't think any of my decks obviously become archenemy until it's like way too late.
That's fair.
So like my Bauble tribal deck, like when I have Salvaging Station and a copy of Salvaging Station in play and an Unwinding Clock and like this huge suite of baubles in my yard that I can like do all these different utility things, bounce stuff, deal damage, protect my cards, draw cards, do all this like random crap. By the time I've like hit that point, a lot of people don't realize, they don't see these pieces individually and go like, oh, he has 4 baubles in his graveyard. That Salvaging Station has a ton of utility. They just don't even like realize it. And they don't see it like come together till like the very end. So I feel like other than my rampy kind of deck where it's like when I ramp into a big creature, people are like, whoa, big creature. Other than that, I feel like my decks don't usually become archenemy until it's kind of over.
Yeah, if you start artifact combo bobbling me like that, I'm gonna and start playing toys in front of me. I'm definitely not going to be like registering half the things you're doing.
It's because most of it's like garbage. Like you're not like realizing that Conjurer's Bauble is like one of the best cards in my entire deck, but it is one of the best cards in my entire deck. And then when I set up to like Salvaging Station, Bauble that draws cards for 0 mana, and then a board wipe, and I draw like 26 cards, then I'm like, then I'm going. But that's like the setup I needed, and it just doesn't appear like it's something useful.
That does make me curious about the Brewers Advantage that comes with being archenemy. Like if you're sitting down with a pod of new players every week, and you don't have like a consistent play group, or you bring a new deck every single time, and you are building your deck super unique. Snail, you have a video about this, the ethics of building a weird niche deck.
Yeah.
Basically, if you're showing up with a new deck every week, I wonder if you like fly under the archenemy radar, like you are like set up to win, and no one realizes it just because the cards you're playing are so jank.
Yeah, I mean, I think that definitely is a real thing, and it's also why I encourage people to emphasize how their deck is strong and make it clear to their opponents what the strengths of their deck is, because I know some people might enjoy kind of, I hear the term Brewers Advantage and I associate it with competitive formats, and I find it very weird to use it for a casual format like Casual Commander, because winning shouldn't necessarily be the be all end all. So I actually like it a lot when other people mention what's strong about their deck, and I like doing the same. It's a lot of fun to kind of let people know, oh yeah, things are about to be a problem.
Okay, interesting. I have so when you say mention something strong about your deck, are you talking about before the game happens or during the game?
I wouldn't usually hype it up a whole lot before the game, but if I'm starting to do something strong, I'll go, yeah, I'm doing the thing I want to be doing here, and it's going to be a problem for you.
I agree with that, because actually just before we started recording, I just finished making changes to my Heliod deck, and I took out all of the non-basics and replaced them with the basic planes. And I put in Endless Horizons. It's
Oh,
this
yeah.
weird enchantment. I forgot we should be listing. A lot of people commented whenever we don't do it that we should be like listing what the cards are that we say. Endless Horizons is a 4-mana white enchantment. You go through your deck and you exile all the planes from it, which in this case would be every land in my deck. And it goes underneath the Endless Horizons basically, and on your upkeep you get to pull a planes from under it and put it into play. So it lets you hit your land drop every turn. It's kind of funny. It's silly. If it gets destroyed, I won't make many land drops for the rest of the game. I'll make some because I have MDFCs, but for the most part, there's no lands in the deck. But the deck also has... I added Goblin Charbelcher, which is a 3-mana, 4-mana artifact, 3 to activate, or it's 3 mana and 4 to activate. Anyway, 7 mana when you use it fully. Yeah, 3 mana 4, there we go. 7 mana when you fully use it, you flip cards until you hit a land, and then you deal that much damage to any target. If it's a mountain, you deal double damage. But since there's no lands in my deck, I'll flip like 40, 50 cards and just dome someone for 50.
Yeah, and then you'll reorder your deck in any order you want.
Yeah, which is super fun. So that's something that, like, I don't know, it's kind of like a silly gimmick. It's not even like a full combo because it doesn't actually win the game. It just takes one player out of the game if they have less life than cards in your library. So, like, if I had Endless Horizons in play and I cast Goblin Charbelcher, I would make sure that the table understands what Charbelcher does while it's on the stack in that scenario, because I feel like it'd be... I don't want to, like, take advantage of them just not knowing that they needed to counter that. But it's not something that I would say at the start of a game, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's okay to leave some surprises to some extent in there. Like, I think misrepresenting the point of a deck is not great, but, you know, if you got a fun little thing in there, you don't gotta give people, you know, the whole ins and outs before it even shows up in their field of vision.
Yeah.
Yeah. I do want to wrap back around to what Alex said about fight the table ideology. Mostly just building decks that are able to maintain Archenemy status. Well, first gain it and then maintain it. I feel like there's a lot of interesting ways you can build a deck that enable it to maintain their enormous advantage without losing it after gaining it. What comes to mind for me first, just like off the top of the dome, is my Sephara deck will typically turn 4 or turn 5, sometimes turn 3, Sephara into play, which is just a huge 7/7 flying lifelinker, gives all my other flyers indestructible. Indestructible flying blockers are very good. And typically my flyers will also be stacks pieces. And then the rest of the deck, after I resolve Sephara, I don't need to play too many spells after she's in play because I just start hitting people with a 7/7. And I can dedicate everything to protection. And protection spells are huge game when it comes to maintaining your advantage. In green, you have Heroic Intervention, but in white, of course, you have Teferi's Protection. You have
a lot of options, actually.
A lot of options. You have so many in white that once you build a board, you can just ride protection until you win. I was curious what you guys think about that sort of thing. Blue has counter spells, of course, but anyway.
Yeah, I think it's important for any deck. I think it's important for any deck that requires a board to win, to have ways to protect its board. It is a bit awkward that some of these cards can be a little win more. Like, Heroic Intervention is terrible as a top deck post-board wipe.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
But it's important to have some ways, especially as a creature-focused deck, to like protect your board. I think that these cards are really good because you have to, if you can like divide a commander game into moments. The turning point at which a deck wins the game is not the last turn of the game. It's not when they landed the combo. It's not when they swung for lethal. It's when they made a big board and countered the board wipe. The fact that they had the counterspell for the board wipe at the right time, that's the turning point, you know? So, like, these types of cards are important to have because you need to be able to actually hit that, like, final turning point before the table comes for you. You can only 3v1 for so long.
That's true. You definitely need a closer.
Going back to what you said, Elk, I definitely agree that the resilience and being able to survive opposing hate is easily the biggest part of, I think, maintaining a deck in the Archenemy status. And I would say the defining trait of this fight the table ideology thing for me would be being able to be winning and feel extremely confident. Just have, believe fully that your opponents can throw all they want at you and they cannot stop you. And that usually just means being very prepared for that. Go into the deck assuming that you're going to get a lot of hate. Pack that protection in there, pack that recursion in there, plan for the rough spots, plan for the contingencies.
Exactly, yeah.
I think that's a big part of it. Just not having your deck be fragile, not having it. And I think Trinket mentioned win more cards, and that's Heroic Intervention is definitely a type of that, and I think protection cards can be a little bit in that territory sometimes. But I think the sweet spot is going to be if you can get in the lead without a whole lot of those cards, because that's generally going to mean that your game plan is going to be less fragile. If you get knocked back a bit, you can catch back up again because you're drawing gas. You're not drawing things where you need to be constantly all the way in the lead. You just have enough removal, enough threats to put back out there that you're able to kind of just keep on churning.
Yeah, this is the beautiful thing about Sephara, in my opinion, as a deck, is I think I have jam-packed that deck with protection. Like, there's probably 15 to 20 protection spells in that deck. And the reason why I don't feel bad about it is because once I have the board state with Sephara in play, like I said, I just don't need to cast any other spell. Sephara will close that game by herself because she's just a big 7/7 flyer that comes down really early. Like, she is huge tempo. And I'm, of course, in a very privileged position here, talking from white. Even green, has Heroic Intervention. Black has Living Death effects, Rise of the Dark Realms, breaking that parity. Blue has counter spells.
Blue also has March of Swirling Mist, which is, like, crazy. That card is insane.
Yeah, blue.
Never played
March of Swirling Mist is incredible, yeah. It can phase out all of your board, or it can phase out opponents' attackers. It's like a fog or like that. You can pitch cards to make it 1 blue mana. It's insane. That card's incredible.
Yeah.
But red, I need to talk about red. Because red, I feel, is the color that most often gets Archenemy first, maybe second, or tied with white. Red can get on the board, can burn people out. You have O'Hare Ashenil, right? You have which amplifies all the burn damage. Torbrand, Thane of Red Vel, which amplifies all your red sources damage. I have a mono red deck, Zurzoth Chaos Rider. He makes devils for you. He can flood the board very easily. But here's the great thing about him that lets you maintain Archenemy status, is the devils ping when they die. So when someone board clears, you can proceed to ping them, and you'll have something like City on Fire in play, which triples all of your damage, or Fire Emancipation, these damage multipliers. So suddenly you're like lightning bolting someone 5 times because they board wiped. Red, maintaining the Archenemy in terms of an aggressive deck, Goblin Bombardment. These are the cards that you want, and getting value right out of the gate, because you have protection in every other color, but red really lacks it. You have like Tybalt's Trickery, right?
You get Cauldron of Souls. It doesn't work in every list, but it's an artifact that can give your whole team persist. In the right deck, it's board wipe protection. It's quite good.
It's 5 mana.
Okay, yeah, you're in mono red. You can have to pay some overcosted garbage. Like, I don't know. It's not that many.
Yeah, but yeah, I find though that's like a really good way to maintain your aggressiveness. Just having Punisher effects for when your opponents do answer your threats, like having a Goblin Bombardment in play is like all you need, and suddenly like you can just at will like -16 someone if they try to do something funny. These hostage situations almost.
Yeah, I think those sorts of effects are big in terms of resiliency. And I think another thing that's highlighted both by your Sephara deck and your Zurzoth deck is the idea of compactness, that you can be doing something really threatening that doesn't actually require that much like constant board resource
or cards
that you don't need to be like you don't need to be constantly maintaining this like intricate synergy engine that will fall apart if it goes under like 4 pieces.
Every one of my
you have this. You just have like a couple of things that are doing a ton to spook your opponents, and that leaves stuff in your hand for later. That leaves resources back. That leaves,
you can redevelop.
Stuff. Yes, that leaves stuff you can tap on later when you start to lose a little bit of momentum, when you're starting to, succumb to some hate from opponents.
A lot of it's also about not overcommitting as the archenemy.
That's very true. Once you're in a winning position, if so long as you keep winning, there's no reason to commit more.
And that's another way to prevent it, because I think it's very easy to want to have that zany wombo turn where you just throw out every single thing you possibly can and wow the table with your deck's spooky massive thing, but then you might lose all that to a board wipe or something.
What are some good cards, or cards that you personally like to maintain archenemy or that go in an archenemy style deck? I've one that comes to mind that I think is really fun.
I mean, go ahead and list it off.
Yeah, have you ever played Standstill?
Oh yeah,
this card's really funny. It's kind of awkward in Commander. You usually don't want to draw your opponent's cards, but I think it's just like a silly card. More real answer, I think, is Urtai the Corrupted. I think, in my opinion, this is like one of the
Is that like the 5 mana like counter?
Yeah, it's Esper like legend that can sacrifice creatures or enchantments to counter spells.
Yes, this is like, man, anything that says do a thing, counter a spell is like peak archenemy in my opinion. It's like this lets you really, really control the pace of the game. Having repeatable removal is so fantastic, but it's like what you said. You don't need to overcommit too much further to the board, because you just have a token generator, and you're just like, all right, cool. Here's my sack the token, counter a key spell, sack the token, counter a key spell, and even just that minimal, like Ophiomancer plus your commander is like every turn cycle. That's one extra counter spell you don't have to like commit or do anything to, and of course, the commander can get insane if you play Intruder Alarm with Lol Mage Mentor. Intruder Alarm untaps all creatures on the board when a creature comes into play. Lol Mage Mentor says when you counter a spell, it makes a 1/1. So with Urtai, you sack a 1/1, counter a spell, it makes a 1/1, untaps Urtai. You can essentially, unless somebody double spells, you can counter everything, entirely. But yeah, repeatable removal, I think, is like, yeah, and like Urtai like exemplifies that archenemy card to me.
Oh yeah, repeated removal is like always something just terrifying. Like you can run into that in my Judith Death Touch ping deck, where you give her Death Touch, and suddenly every time a non-token creature dies on my side, I can Doomblade something, and that draws a lot of ire, of course, because people want to play Magic.
People do not like removal engines. I definitely found that both discrete removal engines, so removal engines where it's kind of mostly just one, maybe 2 cards, and then you have multiple of those, or multiple discrete value engines where it's just 1 card. If you can kind of separate out your, advantage builders so that they don't rely on each other, you get a ton more resiliency, and you can survive so much more removal that way. If one thing going down doesn't doom your operation, if your thing doesn't rely on this kind of centerpiece card that will screw you over if it goes down.
Do you have an example of like a discrete removal engine, or is it just like in theory?
Yeah, so my Rada deck very much operates with a lot of removal engines, and so it'll look like it has Tyrant's Familiar, which is one where every turn it's a big dragon, 7 mana, 7/7. When it swings, if you have your commander in play, it deals 7 damage to an opposing creature. Mm-hmm. So you have that out. You can also have something like a Gruul Rage Beast out. That'll mean that your creature plays then give you fights, and then you can also have something else out, like a Flame Blast Dragon that also has a thing on attack. And just when you get like 1 to 2 of these just like separate things, each doing their own thing separately, suddenly it becomes very hard for it becomes easy to kind of maintain this level of advantage and keep opponents suppressed for longer while you try and press your advantage further. Obviously, I think removal engines can make people a little bit salty, but I think that the same goes for value engines as well. If you have like a couple separate creatures each drawing you cards when some different thing happens, then that can be another way to maintain good value.
Yeah. So do you have Sarkhan's Unsealing in that deck?
I've considered it. I have not added it though, but that card is sick.
Yeah, I'll just read it here for the viewers at home. It's red and 3 for an enchantment. Whenever you cast a creature with power 4, 5, or 6, Sarkhan's Unsealing deals 4 damage to any target, which is great. Repeatable. What's a spell that does 4 damage? Not Bolt.
Flame Slash.
Flame Slash? Is that 4 damage or is that 5?
Flame Slash does 4.
It's
I know because you can't kill Shieldred with it.
Oh, right. Yeah, yeah. It's a repeatable Flame Slash, which can go face. It's kind of cool. But then also, whenever you cast a creature with power 7 or greater, it deals 4 damage to each opponent and each creature and each planeswalker they control. Which is awesome. It's like a one-sided double pyroclasm.
Some might call that a Mizium Mortars.
Yes.
True.
Yeah.
I've never...
That one I ended up...
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, Mizium Mortars is a 6-mana effect. It's very strong.
Oh, I love Mizium Mortars. I played Rakdos Control in 2014. I love Mizium Mortars.
Oh man, cut to ribbons. What a game changer.
I love cut to ribbons.
Yeah, cut to ribbons is 1 in a red, deal 4 to target creature, but then you can aftermath it for X black to make each opponent lose X life.
Yes, I love that card in any sort of. It's in my current Malfagor deck, but I love it in any sort of aggressive deck where you're just wanting, early removal, get rid of a blocker, get rid of an engine, and then later just finish off a player.
Yeah. Anyway, for me, I've already sprinkled throughout the podcast answers to this sort of question. It's going to depend on your deck. Mono red decks that are already on board and beating people to death, probably sandbag your cards. You don't need to play them.
Or politics, if you can politics.
Or politics, yeah. But once you've killed your first player, it's very hard to politics your way out of that. But yeah,
that's true.
But of course, sandbag your cards if you're already winning. White decks probably want to play a lot of protection spells after you've established your board and you're winning on the board, much like a mono red deck. But this time you can just keep up your mana and play these protection spells. Other than that, recursion and black, you have answers to the Archenemy, and I've already mentioned all of them personally. So
what do you do if you become the Archenemy in a game? Perhaps not intentionally, it's just sort of happened in some capacity. What do you do once you're at that point?
See, I always am seeking it out. So
okay, sure.
If I become the Archenemy, I am feeling good, and I am. But I suppose if the question is if I am trying to, maybe stay alive and not succumb to the pressure. I think part of it is just playing very transparently and not making people think that I have anything stronger than I already do. Like, I think the thing that really will kind of make people want to attack you even more is if you're both ahead and you're not acting like you're ahead. But if you're ahead and just being kind of like, yeah, I got all this stuff on my board, pretty cool, huh? I think that tends to put people a little bit more at ease. So if you're trying to at least diffuse the tension a bit, not trying to seem defensive or anything like that, I think definitely can help.
Oh yeah, the evil they know versus the evil they don't, right? Like, they know what's on your board. The mono or the green deck over here is ramping. What are we gonna do about him? You see what I'm doing, but just wait until, Grothama comes down or whatever. Insert big monster. Anyway, for me personally, much like Alex, a lot of my decks do strive to get the Archenemy status. But all of them, I think it varies based on your deck, what you want to do once you've achieved it. Once you are doing your game plan, some decks start killing people. Some decks try to establish a lock. This is your Marchesas and whatnot, establishing a pillow fort beyond with your monarchy and, just controlling the game out. Like, the answer is going to vary deck to deck, very differently.
Yeah, I think for me, like, if I'm playing a control deck in the sense that my goal isn't ever to be Archenemy until I'm ready to, like, win. So usually if I'm purposefully Archenemy in those situations, it's like late game, most people are out of resources, I've kind of grinded them out, I got like a full grip, I'm ready to like close out the game. So I just kind of continue with my game plan. But if it happens like inadvertently, like I kind of get off to like a fast start, some people stumble and my board looks kind of scary, maybe with like my goad deck I have more creatures and stuff in play, I'll like sandbag as hard as I can and just try and tank a board wipe and then pass off the Archenemy status as quickly as I can, just be like, whoa, my board's gone, I got nothing left, look at that guy over there.
Yeah, as someone who jam packs interaction and protection, I'll typically keep committing stuff so long as I can also hold up mana for a protection spell, that sort of thing, unless I think a double protection spell is worthwhile. I have definitely cast a Guardian of Faith into a counter spell to Teferi's protection over the top, that sort of deal.
I definitely have done kind of similar to Trinket in the sense that I will maybe not try and play down myself too much, but if I develop kind of into this powerful commanding position, if I then get shoved back a bit, I will try to be like, oh, yep, I am not gonna be doing much for a bit.
Yeah.
And I think being able to be transparent when you are ahead then makes you much more credible when you do kind of make that statement like, oh, yep, not doing much for a little bit.
Right.
Just kind of hanging out here, trying to set up my draw engine. Being able to acknowledge, oh, yep, I'm spooky now. A little bit less spooky now. Might have to worry about me again later, but not right now. I think trying to keep that constant line of communication is good.
It's important to be honest, like, at all times, because as soon as you're dishonest, you lose all credibility, especially if you play with a regular play group.
Oh, yeah.
And then all that politics goes out the window when, like, nobody believes you.
Yeah, the one thing to me that really seems to, like, is catching me about the sandbagging play, I feel like sometimes when I'm an archenemy in an aggressive sort of strategy, once I've achieved that archenemy status, I just start killing my biggest threat immediately. That would probably be the control player most of the time. Someone who I think has the most board wipes. That's the first person I'm going to kill. But immediately following that, I'm not sandbagging threats if I think playing those threats will establish, very specifically here, if I think those threats in play that I'm playing will establish an extra turn of lethal. There's something known as a clock. You'll hear it a lot in Limited. For example, Windrake, a 2/2 flyer, is a 10-turn clock, right? You need to, before you think about sandbagging your plays after taking out that first player in an aggressive deck, before you consider the sandbagging option, look at life totals. Look at how much power you have in play. Will playing these cards in your hand make it so that way your opponents will die faster than they would have normally if you hadn't played them? In which case, you should 100% develop those pieces and make them have it. Make them have the board clear.
Yeah, as long as the clock is now sped up to before they would draw a board wipe, then it is worth playing,
Yeah, that's like a major caveat to the sandbag your plays point, is if you are in a winning position and playing more cards will actually speed up your clock and make you win faster, I think most of the time you should play those cards, provided you do not have known information about a board wipe. Make them have it, go aggressive, try to close that game.
I think that this is definitely really common for like players playing at random game stores, because a lot of players don't really play as much removal as they probably should, which actually allows you to be a lot greedier as the archenemy. And I think that contributes a lot to power imbalances at random stores, is people don't play enough removal, so the archenemy isn't forced to sandbag and they can win in these much more dominant fashions.
Yeah, and then that's where you get like the real like pub stomper, like, wow, I had absolutely no chance against this monster of a deck.
Right.
Yeah. I feel like every deck I see either has one board wipe or 9. And there's like no in between.
I need to I really need to get back to going to local game stores. Since I've moved, I haven't been able to go to like my local shop to play against randos, because I love that so much, and I really want to see what it's like now around here. I did try to go, but I got scammed by the store, which was fun.
Oh my gosh, yeah, I heard the story.
They had oh my god, wait, did I tell you, Alex?
No.
Okay, they had, all right, so on their website it says like Commander free play. What does that mean to you? Just, in general, what does that mean?
If you pull up and you maybe come to a table and there are other people also coming at that table to play Commander, and then you play freely.
Exactly, and it costs money. You have to like buy this thing ahead of time. It's basically 3 packs. They force you to buy 3 packs, right? And it says on the website, it's like, hey, this is to prioritize players who bought these tickets. If you don't buy it, you might get, when your game ends, you might get booted out or whatever for somebody who did purchase this, right? And I joined their Discord, and I talked to an employee, and they said, oh, there's no wrong time to show up. So, the event starts at like 7. I show up at like 7:30, 7:40, something like that. And every table's full, and the employee goes, oh, no, we're full. You needed to be here for the 6:30 check-in time for casual free play Commander.
Yeah, the check-in time.
I was like, check-in time? I haven't done a check-in time since like a modern event. Like, what is this? That's not Commander free play. And then he was like, oh, sucks to suck. So I haven't been back since, but now that my rage has quelled, I'll maybe try and go again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm at a point in my move where I am scouting local game stores at the place I'm moving, trying to find one that I think might be good to go to one Friday night.
I definitely seem to mainly go to my LGS when I'm testing out a deck for an upcoming video.
That's what I need to do.
I'll go like once or twice a month outside of that, but like I'll go like once or twice a week if I'm preparing for a video on a deck, which I kind of am right now.
Gosh, we have moved off topic.
Oh yeah. Oh. I didn't have anything more. I didn't have anything more about the Archenemy. Like those are my Archenemy questions that I wanted to like pose to you.
Yeah,
I didn't have anything else.
Yeah, I'm all out of Archenemy stuff too. It's just like, yeah, just pointing it out.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it was good Archenemy talk. It's definitely a lot of cool points to be had.
Do we want to move to the question zone?
It sounds good to me.
Sure.
Gosh, it's just named the question zone now, isn't it?
I mean, yeah.
It's too late to change it. It's stuck.
All right. I got a few question zone questions here. Now, if you, the viewer, wants to submit a question that we'll review, put it in the comments of here or Spotify or YouTube Music, which this podcast is now on, and just put question zone at the start. It makes it easier for us to find. You can also tweet at us. Well, not Alex. He doesn't have a Twitter, but you can tweet at us, and just say question zone. Here's a question. I wanted to ask this question because I thought it was kind of interesting, and it's the first question zone question we got on Spotify comments. MadCat20 asks, how do you tune your deck to be faster? I cannot seem to get my deck fast enough to compete with my LGS. I've lost so many games just needing one more turn. For context, my deck takes about 5 to 7 turns on a good draw to get something going.
I mean, I would say my first piece of advice on that would be that you should look at your curve and plan it very intentionally. I found that in my stronger decks, I'm almost always thinking, okay, I'm going to be doing roughly this, maybe this on turn 1, roughly this, maybe this on turn 2, alternate plan, do this on turn 3. But like I am like sequencing it, thinking about every single turn, planning my ramp accordingly, planning my draw accordingly, just making sure all the resources are lined up to do what exactly I need to do.
Yeah, that's very similar to what I'm going to say about this issue is the curve matters a lot. I have 2 aggressive decks, and for Zerzoth, who needs a devil to attack to start accruing value the turn he hits the board, I have a bunch of devils at 2 and 3 mana that are very nice to see in the opening mulligan. Lightning Greaves would work as well to give him haste. And what you can do in that case is my curve is Devil on 2 or 3 or Lightning Greaves, Zerzoth, get value from Zerzoth same turn I've played him. And that curve gets me set up really early. The other piece of this puzzle is ramp. You need, if you cannot compromise your curve That means taking these 4 drops, 5 drops, making them into 3 and 2 drops, which is ideal. Then you need ramp. You need to be packing some rocks in the deck. And the correct ratio, hit the hypergeometric calculator, make sure you have a nice percentage that you feel comfortable with drawing these ramp cards, and jam pack your deck with them to enable these turn 4, turn 5 plays a turn or so earlier than you need them, or than you would normally get them, rather. Basically, try to lower your curve as much as possible. I try to keep mine around mostly 2 and 3 mana value cards, and if I can't do that, jam some rocks in there or whatever ramp you can.
I'll argue on the opposite side. So it depends on how you're losing. If you're losing in the sense that you have stuff on board and you need one more turn to swing and somebody board wipes you or something, the answer isn't always making your thing faster, but it's like we talked about before. Putting in more protection, more counterspells, more something defensively to buy you that one turn. I think a lot of people think of the Commander arms race as like, I need to combo one turn quicker, it's swing out for lethal one turn faster. But you could also grind one turn longer. You could build a deck that is one turn more resilient. It doesn't mean you have to actually speed up your deck. The other option is, of course, if you struggle to be the fastest combo deck at the table, you could just pack more removal, hit all the other combo players, and then just go for any win con on turn 15. It doesn't matter from there, right? As long as you've stopped their combo wins. So yeah, I agree with both of you guys' advice is really good, but I'd say, it kind of depends a little bit on how you're losing.
Yeah, interaction would work very well as well. Stacks pieces and removal would also slow the game down enough to bring your opponents to your speed.
I kind of wanted to talk a little bit about it as well, and I'm curious what you guys think. So there was a lot of questions about people asking more about the bracket system. I'll use this one as an example. How would you feel about the bracket system using a point system to determine which bracket your deck falls into? This user, Alpha Beta 55, for example, says if your deck has 100 to 200 points, it's a bracket 1, and 200 to whatever, it's like bracket 2 or whatever. There's like a total number of points. So if you have 4 bracket 4 cards, that's 16 points to your deck in total. This way, it's not like one bracket 4 card makes my deck CDH all of a sudden. What do you think about point systems in this regard?
Yeah, I also hear a lot about Smogon, I think the name is. There's some.
I have a lot of opinions about Smogon.
I'll leave it to you then, because I personally am not familiar with it. I just got a lot of comments about that on my video about brackets, and then also just saw it in the other podcast comments. But what I don't like about point systems is you are going to have to assign every single Magic the Gathering card a point. All 20,000 of them. Now, of course, unbracketed cards could just be 1 point or 0 points. But what I mean is that the brackets above that then are going to be 15,000 cards or so, maybe 10,000 cards. That's a lot of cards. Also, you need to do it when every new set releases, the second it releases, or sometime soon thereafter. And you're going to be guesstimating on how strong those cards are. Basically, long story short, it's a pretty big mess.
I think another issue with using a point system, and I think this is an issue with a lot of kind of ideas about the bracket system that try to make it more concrete. I think the more concrete any sort of system like that is, the worse it's going to end up, because it will let people try and game it. I think when you make it more about kind of what the exact contents of a deck are, people are going to try and optimize really harder than they should be. This is supposed to be a rule 0 tool. This is supposed to be a thing to make fair games happen. This isn't meant to be like weight classes or whatever. So I think when you're introducing something like a points system, you're adding a whole lot of concreteness to something that really fundamentally is at odds with concreteness as a concept.
Yeah, and I agree with that a lot, actually. I think the main downfall of point system is, yeah, my deck is this many points, therefore I'm in this tier. Let's play. And then you just hate playing against their deck because it's all board wipes or whatever. Like, you can have a not good time against any deck, no matter how strong it is. Basically, also, there's also this complexity about it that I don't like, whereas like signpost bans in brackets maybe could go past the radar a little bit, and that comes with its own problems that we've mentioned in the last video. If you want more topics or more talking about brackets, but
I think the complexity issue is the problem, because like, yeah, if I don't want to sit there and like manually count up how many points my deck is, and especially to like a new player. Like a lot of players don't put their lists online.
Oh yeah.
So like, let's say, you know, little Timmy bought a precon, and then later little Timmy says, I'm gonna build my own deck, and they build a deck or whatever, and then they go to their game store and someone says, how many points is the deck? Then they have to sit there and go, well, this is a, you know, bracket 3, this is a bracket 2, so that's 5, and they have to like manually count it. Like, it's just too many. It's just not easy enough. You know, people are always going to go with the easiest option, which is saying, hey, this is my casual mid-power deck that does X, which is the easiest thing to do.
Yeah, exactly. And with the bracket system, that's a lot more loose, no points. You can say, oh, I have this bracket, and you can call it the specific cards as opposed to like managing all the points together or whatever. Anyway, long story short, just a normal pregame conversation. You don't need to gamify this. People don't upload their decks to Moxfield. Not everyone does. And even then, the people who do, how many of them are like 1-for-1 lists of what the paper deck currently is? Like, keep in mind, our audience here is probably a lot more invested in Magic than the average Magic player. You're listening to a Magic podcast, so we have a sample size here. No matter how many comments say, I do this, I keep all my Moxfield lists updated. You are not the general population. You are very skewed on the more invested end here.
Yeah, exactly. Let me do I want to do my quick Smogon tangent, because
absolutely
I have a lot of things to say about this, and I'm going to distill as quickly as I can. Alex, have you played on Smogon?
I have not.
I've never touched Smogon either.
Oh, okay. Okay, so Smogon, super fun. I've literally thousands of hours in it, been playing since like forever. It's great. It's a battle simulator for competitive Pokemon, so you don't have to spend hours and hours grinding and, you know, mathing out the exact EVs and IVs and blah 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 and doing all this other garbage. You just click, you know, I want this Pokemon, here's the EV spread I want, etc., etc. Anyway, the way that they do their teaming systems is based on usage, which is really interesting. So there's OU, which is overused, and then underused, rarely used, never used, PU, which is just a pun, it's stinky, bad Pokemon, and then untiered, and then Ubers is things that are banned in OU, and like stronger than that. So if a Pokemon is used a lot, it goes into overused. If it's used less, it goes into underused. If you make a team and you have one OU Pokemon on there, your whole team is OU. You cannot use it in a lower tier. Similar to how the brackets, you know, would be like, if you have one card, then, you know, my deck is a bracket 4, not 3, even though it's just one card. It's very different in Pokemon, though. I think this is a really, like, off comparison. First off, one Pokemon is 1/6 of your team.
Exactly.
One card is not 1/6 of your deck. Yeah, if I have you know, some Ubersmon like Kyogre or something with a choice specs, it'll sweep the entire enemy UU team. There's nothing in the entire format for UU that could beat a specs Kyogre. So like, yeah, one Pokemon does make a huge difference because one Pokemon can single-handedly win the entire game for me. It's not quite the same in EDH. One Ancient Tomb isn't going to make my precon suddenly strong enough to steamroll the whole table. It just doesn't, it's not a good comparison. I love Smogon, and I think their rules are really cool, and I respect the dev team there for making 1v1 competitive Pokemon an actually viable game. Do you guys also know that Pokemon doesn't run tournaments that are single battles? They have to do double because single battles is so poorly designed.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Interesting. I didn't know that.
But another thing about Smogon too is that it's all digital. So when you are making your Smogon team, you're just automatically queued into the league that you're supposed to be in.
Correct.
When you're playing paper Magic, there's no like HUD that tells you all, like real life HUD that, well, maybe one day with Neuralink, you know, Google Glasses, like our eyes are replaced with technology, like we're actual, you know, Skitari. Yeah, no, but like you can't see the deck in real life with all the point values on them until they, you know, actually print. Maybe they might start printing the bracket power indicator right next to the power and toughness of the card. You know?
That'd be so funny. Okay, sorry if my Pokemon tangent was too long for people. I love Smogon. So, yeah. Hey, put a comment if you want to see me stream some, like, I don't know, OU random battles. Okay, all right. Let's do this one. Let's do this one. This one I feel like is a fun, good question. Link5236, who I believe is actually a patron of mine, assuming those numbers are the same numbers. What advice would you give to someone who is relatively new to Magic and is looking to build a first commander deck without it looking like a clone of a million other decks? Especially if you don't have great knowledge of past sets.
So I have answered this question. I have an entire video about it. My deck building video. I put a lot of love and care into that deck building video, and I tried to make it at least somewhat consumable for a new player. I'll simmer down the points very
I think it was
simply.
consumable for a new player. I think it was a good video.
That was a good video.
The simplest point I want to drive home is, if you do not want your deck to look like someone else's, never open EDH Rec until the very end. Build your deck by yourself. And the way you do this is you read Magic cards. Read Magic cards, even cards you're not considering putting in your deck or building around. Because when you read a Magic card, you learn its syntax. When this enters, or like when card name enters, great. You now have that vocabulary in your head, and you can now plug that into Scryfall. Learn Scryfall syntax and use that search engine to search for cards similar to cards that you want to play with. So, for example, you want to play with Viscera Seer, which is an unbounded sacrifice outlet. You can sacrifice any number of creatures to it. So you look up cards that say sacrifice a creature : in quotation marks, and you'll get a list of all of those unbounded sacrifices. You can sort them by mana value. You can sort them by color identity. Do this for all the death triggers. Oh, I'm going to pick up this death trigger and this death trigger to sacrifice to my sacrifice effects. Oh, what about things that FO from the graveyard to the battlefield? Now I'm going to look up all the recursion spells and see if I can recur these sorts of things. Basically, long story short is, the more Magic cards you get exposed to, the more you're going to be able to search for cards using Scryfall, using these search engines to build your deck around that you want to synergize with. And then on top of this, at the very end of it all, what I want to drive home more than anything is, do not be afraid to fail. If you have paid a budget amount into a deck or proxied a deck, the P word, if you have proxied a deck or you have made it very budget, you can fail. You can make an absolute pile of garbage, and it doesn't matter, because you will have learned from that experience. You will know what cards to cut, and you will know what cards to put back in, or what cards to replace them with. You know, it's all iteration. You're never going to make a good commander deck on your first draft. Anyway, that's my tangent. Watch my video for my full thoughts on the matter.
I need to remember to put like a card or link to both of your videos that we talked about in this. If this podcast comes up and I don't have a card there, remind me, I'll put it. Alex, what do you think about this? What's some advice you give to a new player here?
Yeah, I'll keep it relatively brief, because I think Elle covered a whole lot of good stuff there. I would just say, look around and find a card that speaks to you. Find something, that just seems unique and seems like something up your alley. I know I had a friend who earlier today saw a Genku sitting on my table, which Genku is a fun card that makes little token guys when you have creatures that leave the battlefield. I don't know how popular it is. I think it's probably somewhat popular, but yeah, just find a card that makes you happy. It makes you go, oh, I kind of want to see something with that.
I like that idea. I mean, I love building around cards in the 99, so I love finding weird cards that you like. I think I'll say, if you I think Alex's suggestion of learning card syntax and using the Scryfall to just dig and find cards is probably the best option. But if you want something even simpler than that, you can use EDH Rec, but I would go to the bottom of the barrel of EDH Rec. When you're like, oh, what's a mono red commander, skip the first 6 lines, just skip them, and find some like weird jank thing. And a lot of times you can click on that, you'll find on EDH Rec the specific support cards that do happen to go well with that deck, which is usually like 4 or 5 cards, and then the rest of it is kind of up to you, because there's nothing else that goes with so I don't know, I'm thinking of the commander that like you can pay 2 mana and you flip the power and toughness of all creatures.
Oh yeah, I cannot remember the name of that card for the life of me.
Yeah, I've just all the Kamigawa cards have like blended into my mind after doing like 300 of them for these shorts.
You should not do those chronologically.
I did take a Kamigawa break for Master of Pain. I'm almost done with Kamigawa. I'm almost done. I'm like this close to losing it, but I can see Ravnica. But like the flippy guy, one of the best cards in the deck is this other jank artifact that gives a creature -X/-O. So you make a creature's power 0 and then you kill it. It's like repeatable removal, multiple funny goofy pieces. It uses weird jank cards. But the rest of the deck is just red, whatever you want, So your deck is going to look unique because 90% of people have just never even seen your commander before. You have the quote-unquote good pieces in the deck because EDHREC helped you find those good synergy pieces. But then the rest of your deck is not going to look like other people's lists there because it's just going to be other random red cards you like or value pieces that you thought were good. And I think that's a good way to get started. That's also pretty easy. Although, yes, please learn how to use Scryfall. Watch Elk's video.
Random side note, because you mentioned EDHREC. I found that the commanders that have between 500 and 1,000 decks are like the perfect hipster sweet spot where they have enough decks where that it's not like a totally silly idea, but they also aren't overly explored. They're not super calcified. They don't have strong expectations from everybody else of what exactly you're doing. You're not going to get people rolling their eyes the second you roll up to a table, or people assuming a whole lot. You'll get kind of people who are interested and people who are curious about what you got going on with that mildly unusual commander.
Oh, absolutely. I most of my commanders fall within that range, and I have found that I have yet to build a deck in that range that I have not liked. I find that they also just generically, maybe it's just the ones I gravitate towards, I guess. They're all very like synergy based, which is something a lot of players crave in Commander, of course. Not just like a value pile. Most players want to do some sort of funny synergy stuff.
Sub 200 is where it gets really hipster though. Sub 200, that's where you find the gems. But yeah, it'll be a little harder to get those ones to function. So
anyway, we should probably wrap up this podcast in some neat manner and cut that part, of course.
No.
Oh,
when do we wrap up this podcast in a neat manner?
Here, I can give some more personal information if we want to continue the segment.
I think I have to cut that. I feel like we could get reported.
Probably.
I'm going to end the podcast by saying we cut a bunch of stuff at the end here. This is the end of the podcast.
You guys are never going to hear what we cut there for that, there's 5 minutes we were talking. You guys are never going to know. But the podcast is over now.
Yeah, I'm stopping.
I'll have to manufacture extra effort for future editing con.
Yeah, oh my god.